They said it was a misunderstanding, a seat mix-up, a technical glitch. But when security dragged me off the plane in handcuffs, no one asked if I belonged there. They didn't see a CEO. They saw a problem, a disruption, a woman too confident for her skin tone. What they didn't realize, what they never expected, was that I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to turn that flight into a case study for every silent injustice, every brushed aside complaint, for every time someone like me was told to sit somewhere else. This isn't just my story, it's a reckoning. I had just opened my laptop when the shadow fell across my seat. "Ma'am, please gather your belongings. You need to come with us." The officer's voice was neutral, but his grip wasn't. His hand hovered too close to my arm, a silent threat wrapped in civility. I looked up slowly, already knowing what was coming, but still refusing to believe it. "I'm in my assigned seat, first class, seat 2A, I said calmly, showing the boarding pass again on my phone. "Your airline confirmed the error." He didn't respond. Instead, a second officer joined him, one on either side. I heard the hush fall over the cabin, followed by the unmistakable clicks of smartphones going live. I wasn't just a passenger anymore. I was the morning headline. "Ma'am," the first officer repeated, this time less patient. "You need to come with us now." "For what reason?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "Am I being charged with something?" "We're just following protocol," he said. That word again. Protocol. The same word used to justify everything from extra screenings to fatal traffic stops. I was done asking questions. I reached slowly for my bag, but before I could finish, cold metal pressed against my wrist, then the other. The handcuffs were tight, deliberate, designed not just to restrain, but to humiliate. A collective gasp rippled through first class. I heard one woman whisper, "Oh my God, she's a doctor. I've seen her on Forbes." Another muttered, "They're actually arresting her?" And then came the voice that would haunt me for weeks. "They always think they're entitled to more than they deserve." I didn't turn to see who said it. I didn't have to. The truth of that sentence had followed me my entire life. As they led me down the aisle, the cameras stayed trained on my face. I kept it neutral, controlled. No tears, no begging. But inside, I was burning. Not just with rage, but with something worse, disbelief. After everything I'd built, everything I'd overcome, this was still my reality. Security walked me through the terminal like I was a threat, not a CEO. My heels echoed against the polished tile, each step stabbing deeper into the floor of my dignity. I had been dehumanized before, by clients, by investors, by professors who assumed I was only in the room because of a scholarship. But this was the first time the entire system moved in synchronized judgment. Like it had been waiting for me to make one wrong move, one misstep, so it could snap shut around me. We reached the holding room. Sterile walls. A single metal chair. One-way mirror. No phone. No lawyer. I was stripped of my title, my autonomy, and my voice. The officer dumped my briefcase onto the table and started sifting through it like I was smuggling explosives. My conference notes, investor packets, medical breakthroughs I had spent years cultivating, now treated like contraband. "You're making a huge mistake," I said. My voice cracked a little, not from fear, but fury. "You can explain that when someone comes to process you," he said, not looking up. I sat there for an hour, wrists numb from the cuffs, legs cramping, staring at the clock. No questions, no charges, just silence and fluorescent light. Then the first video hit Twitter. A 45-second clip of me raising my voice, edited just right. It didn't show the man demanding I move from the seat I'd reserved. Didn't show the app on my phone proving my boarding pass. Just a black woman refusing to comply, flanked by two white officers. The caption read, "Entitled passenger delays flight after claiming she deserves first class." Within minutes, the replies divided like oil in water. She got what she deserved. Another Karen in reverse. Wait, isn't she a CEO or something? The narrative had splintered. and I was no longer in control of it. That was the real twist. I thought the humiliation on the plane was the low point, but seeing the world dissect my worth, my right to exist in a space I had paid for without knowing me, that was the true violation. My assistant, Zoe, had texted me just before takeoff. "Everything good?" I hadn't been able to reply. Now my phone sat in an evidence locker, and my silence was being weaponized. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and pictured my father. He had warned me. "You'll be twice as good, Liv, and they'll still see half." He didn't say it out of bitterness. He said it out of survival. When the door finally opened again, it wasn't a supervisor or a lawyer. It was another officer, younger, black, uncomfortable. "Dr. Carter?" he asked gently. "Yes. We're going to verify some things now. Please hold tight." He didn't apologize. Not yet. But the look in his eyes said he already knew. He saw me. And for the first time since I boarded that plane, I remembered. I saw me too. The handcuffs came off, but the bruises remained. The younger officer, his name tag read Green, offered me water and a faint apology. Not official, not in writing. Just 2 words said in a hushed voice. "I'm sorry." "I need my phone," I said, ignoring the sting in my wrists. "Now." He hesitated. "Protocol says," I met his gaze. "Officer, I am Dr. Olivia Carter, CEO of Genova Biosciences. I was illegally detained. You are looking at a civil lawsuit if that phone isn't in my hands in the next 2 minutes. The shift was subtle, but instant. My name had weight. He realized it too late. 10 minutes later, I was in the back of a black car, phone in hand, heels off, pressing my thumb against screen after screen. Texts, news alerts, missed calls. All of them swirling around the same thing, the video, the flight, me. Zoe had left a dozen voicemails. Daniel, my COO, had sent me 3 urgent messages. Sophia, our PR director, simply wrote, "Say nothing yet. We're already working it." I closed my eyes, let the cool leather of the seat settle against my back, and let memory do what it does best, pull me backward. 15 years ago, I was a pre-med student with 2 part-time jobs and a research grant that barely covered tuition. During summer, I interned with the FAA's Internal Risk Management Unit. Not glamorous, not medicine, but relevant. I needed the stipend. What I didn't expect was to meet Leonard Bryant. He was the head of the FAA's Crisis and Passenger Behavior Division, a sharp-tongued, steel-spined strategist who could smell a media disaster 10 minutes before it exploded. On day 1, he asked me to read every public incident report involving passenger removals for the last 5 years. "You want to understand how power behaves when it's scared?" he said. "Start with who they choose to drag off planes." I spent that summer learning how optics worked, how silence was sometimes louder than outrage, how certain phrases in reports, uncooperative, hostile, confused, became justification for force. On my last day, Leonard looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Olivia, you'll be someone someday. Just promise me. When the system turns on you, don't react. Strategize. Think like they think. And make sure your receipts are bulletproof." 15 years later, I wasn't just someone. I was the founder of one of the most promising biotech companies in the US, with 10 active patents and a global reputation for innovation in neural regeneration. And I had just been dragged off a plane like a threat, because I sat where I belonged. My car pulled up to the Four Seasons. Zoe was waiting in the lobby, phone in one hand, tablet in the other. "You're trending," she said flatly. I figured. Had Dr. Dragged is already at 2.4 million views, but don't panic. Sophia's mapped it. Support is rising, but the first video is bad. I didn't need her to show me. I'd already seen it. "Where's Daniel?" "Upstairs. Crisis room's already set up. Anthony's on a flight in. We'll land within the hour." I nodded. The elevator ride to the suite was silent. Not heavy, focused. Inside, the suite had transformed. Screens displayed news outlets, Twitter feeds, Reddit threads. The air buzzed not with chaos, but choreography. Daniel greeted me with a firm hug. "We've already frozen the Atlantic Airways contract." The words hit like steel. I had been days away from signing a $3 million deal with Atlantic for a diversity and innovation partnership. It would have funded 3 new trials and expanded our reach in Asia. But now, I want full documentation of every interaction between them and our team over the last 6 months, I said. Every call, every meeting, every email. Already pulled. Good. Send it to Anthony. He'll want leverage. And what about your statement? I paused. Not yet. Let them talk. Let them scramble. I turned to Sophia. How bad is the clip? She exhaled. It's tight, edited. Shows you standing, gesturing, no audio, just their narrative. But we've found 3 full-length recordings from other passengers. One of them shows the moment you asked for clarification and were ignored. Secure that one, I said. And whoever recorded it, contact them, privately, discreetly. She nodded. Then I walked to the center of the room, looked at each member of my team, and said calmly, I want them to think I'm emotional, reactive, that I'm going to rush to the media crying racism. Let them build that assumption. And then? Zoe asked. Then, I smiled. We burn them with their own playbook. My strength wasn't just in science. It wasn't just in leadership. It was in understanding how systems behave under pressure and how to turn pressure into policy. That wasn't weakness they saw on the plane. It was threat. Not the loud kind, the strategic kind. The kind that dismantles legacies and rewrites rules. That's who I was, and I had only just started. 6 hours. That's how long they kept me in that airless room with fluorescent lighting and no clear explanation. Not a charge, not a form, not a single verification step. Just silence and suspicion. The officer from earlier, Taylor, came in once, leafing through my ID with mock interest, like he was deciding whether I looked CEO enough to be real. He didn't ask questions, just smirked, like my presence in first class was somehow a con, a performance I got caught faking. Every minute that ticked by tightened the knot in my stomach. This wasn't just inconvenience anymore. It was control, domination, a silent message. You don't belong here, and now we get to prove it. What they didn't realize was that the longer they stalled me, the worse it would become for them. By hour 2, my team had already triggered internal protocols. Daniel knew what to do. Olivia Carter being detained in silence was not just a PR issue. It was a breach of multiple partnership obligations, and one of those obligations involved a set of investors who did not take kindly to radio silence. At hour 3, the calls began. The Japan Biotech Investment Council, JBIC, was expecting me to deliver a virtual pre-brief from my hotel suite ahead of our meeting in San Francisco. They had already wired a $500,000 good faith deposit into our escrow account. Their chief liaison, Mr. Hiroshi Tanaka, was known for his precision and zero tolerance for disorganization. When I didn't show, he called Genova's main line, then Zoe's cell, then the backup number for international emergencies. He was told I'd missed my flight due to a seat discrepancy. Hiroshi didn't believe in discrepancies. He believed in documentation. So he called Atlantic Airways directly. But they didn't answer. Not the media line, not the executive office, not even the emergency corporate liaison they were contractually obligated to maintain during active partnerships. Why? Because someone, somewhere in that building, had decided the best course of action was silence. To contain the situation, to handle it internally until it either blew over or could be buried. They didn't want to alert law enforcement beyond airport jurisdiction. That would trigger records, reports, outside documentation. No, they were going to sit on it. Wait it out. Except this wasn't 1998. Silence doesn't work in a world where Twitter moves faster than fax machines. By hour 4, Hiroshi had escalated. He called the U.S. trade attaché in Tokyo, who in turn called the Japanese consulate in San Francisco, who in turn reached out to the Department of Commerce liaison monitoring international biotech agreements. All of them asked the same question: where is Dr. Olivia Carter? None of them got an answer. Inside the holding room, I had no idea how far the ripple had gone, but I knew the playbook. I had interned under the man who wrote it. Delay, discredit, dismiss. If necessary, offer a vague apology, an internal retraining that amounts to nothing. That was the old way. But I wasn't old leadership. I leaned back in my chair, watching Taylor walk past the window for the 5th time, pretending not to see me. He thought he was in control. But every second he refused to verify my identity. Every time he said protocol instead of truth, he made it worse. I had built Geneva Biosciences from my kitchen table, turned a hypothesis about neural restimulation into FDA-approved treatments, and sat across from prime ministers and presidents to discuss medical equity. And now I was being treated like a suspicious package because I had dared to sit in my rightful seat. By hour 5, the call came from the airline's executive assistant to their CEO. "Sir, we have an escalation. It's from Tokyo." They scrambled, pulled up the flight manifest, cross-referenced passenger IDs, and that's when the blood drained from their faces. The woman they just had escorted off their plane in cuffs wasn't just a passenger. She was their soon-to-be partner in a high-profile, multi-million-dollar diversity initiative launched in the wake of their last discrimination scandal, the one they thought they'd finally put behind them. Their entire board had reviewed the partnership proposal. Their PR team had drafted press releases. Their internal diversity chief had pitched it to Forbes. And the woman at the center of that campaign had just been paraded through their plane like a criminal. Their panic was immediate, but not righteous. It was survival. "How do we fix this?" someone asked. "Do not call the police," someone else said. "We'll handle it here." At hour 6, Officer Green returned to the holding room. He looked exhausted, like he'd been caught in a storm someone else created. "Dr. Carter," he said, voice lower now, "we've verified your identity. You're free to go." "That's it?" I said. "No explanation? No apology?" He hesitated. "There's an Atlantic Airways representative waiting to speak with you." I almost laughed. They had finally remembered who I was. I stood slowly, wrists aching where the cuffs had left their mark. "Good," I said. "Let's see what they have to say." But deep down, I already knew. They wouldn't say anything meaningful. Not yet. Because people like them only speak when forced. When leverage outweighs arrogance. When the cost of silence becomes higher than the price of admission. They thought this was over. They had no idea it had just begun. The air outside the holding room felt thinner, cleaner, but not because the pressure had lifted. It was the calm before a different kind of storm. As soon as I stepped into the waiting SUV, Zoe slid in beside me and handed over her tablet like a weapon being returned to its owner. "We have traction," she said without ceremony. "Support's building, but we need strategy now, not just sympathy." I nodded. "Where's the team?" "In the suite. Daniel's coordinating with Anthony. Sophia has media queries sorted into red, yellow, and green tiers depending on level of influence and risk. I've got legal on standby." I glanced at the screen. Already, social media was humming. There were hashtags in multiple languages. A Brazilian news anchor had called it a modern Rosa Parks moment. A British MP had retweeted one of the full-length videos under the caption, "This is why we need structural reform, not just corporate apologies." I tapped open the messages waiting for me. One caught my eye immediately, a name from a past life. T. Bryant. Watching. Ready if you need me. Leonard's son. The legacy of the man who taught me everything about how power really behaves behind closed doors. I closed the tablet and stared out the window as we sped toward the Four Seasons. There's a particular silence that follows public humiliation. It's not the absence of noise. It's the pause between judgment and consequence. I knew we were in that pause now. I also knew how to weaponize it. By the time I walked into the suite, Anthony was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled, standing over a spread of legal printouts. You want to nuke them or strangle them with their own protocol? He asked without looking up. Why not both? I replied. He smiled grimly. I hoped you'd say that. Sophia looked up from her laptop. The flight manifest is public. We're tracking down each first-class passenger who recorded anything. 4 have posted full-length clips. 1 is a journalist I've already messaged. Good. Prioritize that, I said. I want versions that don't go viral first. Controlled, exclusive, before we hand the story to the masses. Then Zoe spoke. Her voice was steady, but something about her eyes had shifted. Liv, I found something. I turned toward her. I ran Karen Blackwell's name through an industry watchdog list. She used to work for Aeroline Air, let go 3 years ago. For what? Unreported conflict with a black pilot. She filed a complaint against him for intimidation. Internal review found he'd simply corrected her misstatement about flight safety protocol in front of passengers. I inhaled sharply. She filed 2 similar complaints after that. One against a Latino passenger, one against an Asian American crew member. And Atlantic hired her anyway? I asked. Zoe nodded. No disciplinary flags showed up on the surface-level background checks. They never called Aeroline for details, just ran a standard HR scan. Anthony flipped through the folder in front of him. That's negligence, if not willful ignorance. Get me her personnel file, I said. Off the record. I don't want it through legal yet. Start with internal contacts. I know someone in their crew scheduling department, Sophia offered. We went to grad school together. We weren't close, but he once mentioned how often complaints were lost in the system. Reach out, I said. Carefully. This wasn't revenge. This was audit. The kind they never expected someone like me to conduct. Zoe turned her screen toward me again. There's more. Internal LinkedIn chatter shows Karen bragged about having friends in the cockpit, specifically Captain James Wilson. He's flown over 1,000 hours with her. I didn't need the subtext spelled out. Of course he knew her. Of course that's why he backed her without question. This wasn't about seeding charts. This was about alliances, quiet, habitual favoritism wrapped in protocol. I stood in front of the window, watching the Atlanta skyline shift under the setting sun. They didn't just treat me like a threat, I said quietly. They protected their own. Anthony walked over, holding a single sheet of paper. This is their latest statement. I read it twice. Carefully crafted, non-committal, full of vague phrasing. We are aware of an incident involving a passenger and are reviewing the situation in accordance with standard protocols. Atlantic Airways remains committed to the safety and dignity of all passengers. Dignity, I repeated, my voice flat. Anthony met my eyes. They're trying to write it out. Then let's shorten the ride. That night I worked until 3 a.m. By morning, we had 2 internal contacts from Atlantic who had anonymously submitted files, emails, crew complaints, procedural gaps, and 1 chilling internal memo from 6 months prior. Do not escalate passenger disputes unless necessary. First-class seating complaints should be de-escalated in favor of frequent flyer loyalty resolution. Minimize viral exposure risks by redirecting in-terminal. It was a game plan, a script, and I was going to tear it apart, line by line. I didn't need a microphone to be heard. Let the world scream. Let hashtags do their usual whirlwind. I wasn't going to add my voice. Not yet. Not while I could still control the silence. That silence was power now. I refused every interview request, declined every podcast, even turned down an exclusive offer from a major news network promising a platform to tell my side. I didn't need to tell my side. I needed them to prove theirs. Instead of taking the stage, I took to the shadows and began the quiet reversal. It started with the employees, not mine, theirs. Within 48 hours, 3 anonymous email accounts sent encrypted messages to our legal team, all from inside Atlantic Airways. They weren't whistleblowers seeking fame. They were people who had seen too much and finally had someone to send it to. One message stood out immediately. Check the April 16th call log. The CEO was on with Senator Mark Alcott. There's a transcript. Not official, but it exists. There was a discussion about protecting corporate optics and not escalating the Olivia Carter incident further. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Anthony with a single sentence. Verify it. Quietly. While he traced the trail, I restructured our internal flow. My team had already begun a systematic, coordinated information release. Not chaos, not leaks, seeds. We gave an exclusive to a mid-tier finance blog with strong ethics but limited reach. A full breakdown of my credentials, my philanthropic work, and my history with systemic advocacy. No mention of the incident. Just context. Next, we leaked a redacted email from one of Atlantic's junior HR staff acknowledging ongoing concerns around crew behavior bias in premium cabins. That went to a tech journalist on Twitter known for her subtle but sharp commentary. And then we sat back and watched. People started connecting the dots on their own. When an audience discovers injustice organically, their fury is more genuine, more committed. While the world debated, speculated, theorized, I was watching the chessboard. And then came the transcript. Anthony slid the folder across the table like it was radioactive. Off the record, unofficial, and technically illegal if we ever claimed it as ours, he said. But it's real. The call was dated 2 hours after I'd been released from airport custody. William Parker, CEO of Atlantic Airways, speaking with Senator Mark Elcott, chair of the Senate Subcommittee on Transportation Oversight and longtime recipient of corporate donations from the aviation sector. The phrases were damning. We need this buried, Mark. She's not playing ball. If she goes public, this becomes another nightmare. Can you ensure it doesn't get picked up by oversight? There's room to interpret the footage. We just need to manage the narrative. They didn't just want to protect their image. They wanted to erase mine. I sat in silence, reading the transcript again. Not angry, not shocked, just confirmed. So much of our lives, black lives, female lives, the lives of those who dare to rise beyond where society slotted us, are spent trying to prove what we already know, that the system isn't broken. It was built this way. I turned the last page, looked up at Anthony, and smiled faintly. Game on. The first news outlet to bite was a small local station in St. Louis. A quiet headline. Insider tips spark questions over Atlantic Airways ethics practices. They didn't name me, didn't mention the flight, just planted the seed. Then the Daily Ledger picked it up. They did name me, but framed the story around anonymous FAA sources and unverified leaks about corporate influence over political oversight. By then, the phrase, the Olivia Carter incident, was trending. Not because I told my story, but because they tried to erase it. Sophia had never looked more alive. Public opinion's swinging, she reported. Even the conservative outlets are calling this suspiciously quiet for such a high-profile company. Good, I said. Keep them guessing. No press, no comments. We don't owe them clarity until we're done collecting consequences. That night, Daniel poured 2 glasses of bourbon in my suite. I took mine, stared into the amber, and said, "They thought I wanted to cry on camera." "You're not crying," he said. "I'm building." We toasted to that. By morning, Atlantic's PR machine had begun to crack. They released a new statement. Recent events have been the subject of misinformation, and we remain committed to transparency and trust. But trust wasn't theirs to claim anymore. Trust had shifted. To the passengers who posted the unedited videos, to the ex-employees who sent damning emails, to the anonymous source who gave us the transcript, to me, without saying a word. I posted one thing that day. One sentence. The truth doesn't need a spotlight, it just needs time. In 20 minutes, it had 1.2 million likes. I didn't need to scream. They were screaming for me now. When systems begin to crumble, the first cracks don't appear in walls. They appear in whispers. By the end of the week, those whispers had become declarations. Her name was Aisha Thomas, 27 years old, Atlantic Airways flight attendant, formerly anonymous until now. She went live on Instagram at 9:43 a.m. from a blank white wall. No background noise, no filters. Her voice was even, her posture straight. "I'm breaking my NDA because silence protects predators," she said. My phone buzzed off the table as messages exploded in real time. Sophia turned up the TV. Major networks were already clipping her stream before it ended. Aisha detailed everything, not just what happened to me, but what she had witnessed over 3 years in uniform. The comments that were never reported because it wasn't worth the drama. The upgrade checks only asked of passengers of color. The unspoken rules about which crew members were flight deck favorites, and which complaints were flagged as emotional. Then came the email. She showed it, full screen, dated just 2 months before my incident. "Karen, please exercise extra vigilance in premium cabin assignments. We've received reports of passengers attempting to occupy open seats without authorization. Keep security protocols in mind. Trust your instincts." "Trust your instincts," Aisha repeated, eyes locked on the camera. "You don't have to say race when the system already hears it." That email lit the match. Within 12 hours, 3 former Atlantic employees, 2 flight attendants and 1 HR assistant, followed Aisha's lead. Each released their own screenshots, internal memos, Slack messages filled with coded language and passive racism. A news cycle that had started with me now had bloodlines of its own. The story was no longer mine. It was a movement. But the most unexpected twist came not from inside the company, but from the outside. A man named Carl Houston. He had posted a video 2 days after my removal, one of the earliest full-length clips, showing the exchange between me and the flight staff. He'd received hundreds of thousands of views. He framed it as exposing injustice. Except someone noticed something strange. A fellow passenger on that same flight, anonymous but sharp-eyed, compared his clip with their own. Same angle, same time, but not quite the same sound. Carl had edited the audio, removed the part where the captain told the officers, "Let's move her quickly, we're already behind." And then came the bombshell. Someone leaked Carl's private DMs with a freelance journalist from the Globe Syndicate. "Full HD unedited. 10 grand, and I'll give exclusive licensing. Might get you a Pulitzer." Carl wasn't an activist. He was an opportunist. When the messages dropped, the internet turned on him with a fury usually reserved for traitors. I didn't need to say anything. Truth was walking on its own legs now, but I did need to act. That afternoon, I composed a letter addressed directly to William Parker, CEO of Atlantic Airways. Not to sue, not to threaten, to demand. To Mr. Parker, by now your board has seen the videos, heard the voices, read the emails. You no longer operate in the shadows of ambiguity. This was not an isolated incident. This was culture, and culture, left unchecked, becomes policy in disguise. I am not interested in private settlement offers. What I want is accountability. Therefore, I formally request the following: a full public apology for the mishandling of my removal from Flight 2271, an internal investigation into discriminatory patterns in seating and crew conduct, the immediate suspension of Karen Blackwell and Captain James Wilson pending review, the release of anonymized internal complaint data over the past 5 years. Attached are records, documents, and testimony from former and current employees compiled independently. You may delay, you may redact, you may spin, but what you cannot do now is pretend. Sincerely, Dr. Olivia Carter, CEO, Geneva Biosciences. The letter was sent by courier and digital upload, but we didn't release it to the public. Yet. Instead, we let the clock tick, and the media keep asking, has Atlantic responded? They hadn't, not officially, but leaks began to suggest internal chaos. A PR assistant accidentally CC'd the wrong email thread to a reporter, exposing that 3 crisis firms had been hired simultaneously. One to manage news, one to conduct internal optics, and one to monitor reputational fallout in high net worth communities. A legal draft surfaced. A half apology with phrases like, "unfortunate miscommunication," and "valued business partner." Too little, too late. Then came a phone call from an unlisted number. I answered. I didn't say hello. A voice said, "Dr. Carter? I represent 3 board members seeking an off-the-record discussion." "I don't do off-the-record," I replied. Silence. Then, "We can offer substantial revisions to the partnership terms with full discretion." I smiled, not because of the offer, but because they still thought this was about business. They still hadn't realized the transaction I was chasing wasn't financial. It was systemic. So I said, "Draft your apology, public, specific, and signed by all current leadership. Then we'll talk." Then I hung up. That night I sat with Zoe and Daniel, watching Aisha Thomas being interviewed on primetime television. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize. She just spoke. "We're told to trust the system," she said. "But sometimes the system has to be scared into behaving better." She looked directly into the camera. "And right now, it's scared. That means we're doing something right." I turned the screen off, then stood. "We're close," I said quietly. "Don't let up." Because I knew the apology would come. But that wouldn't be the end. It would be the beginning. The podium was small, unbranded. No flashy banners, no sponsor logos. Just a mic, a nameplate, and me. Behind me, a muted gray backdrop stood like a wall of quiet resolve. Cameras clicked and hummed, reporters shifting in their seats, waiting to see if I'd deliver outrage or restraint. I gave them neither. I gave them facts. "Thank you all for being here," I began, voice calm but crisp. What happened to me on Atlantic Airways Flight 2271 was not an isolated mistake. It was the inevitable outcome of a culture designed to protect itself. There were no gasps. Not yet. I tapped the clicker in my hand, and behind me, the screen lit up. Video. Full footage. Flight 2271. Incident. Unedited. Unfiltered. Captured by 2 angles. The cabin interaction. The refusal to check my boarding pass. The captain addressing the male passenger by name while ignoring mine. The moment the officers were summoned, not due to a threat, but to convenience. The handcuffs. The walk of shame. And then, the cherry on top. A time-stamped overlay showing my flight profile, boarding information, and elite platinum status. The truth wasn't dramatic. It was undeniable. I didn't need to add emotion. The evidence was the emotion. I let the video play in silence, ending with a still shot. My hands bound behind me, my face unreadable. A steward looking away. Then I turned back to the press. "This isn't just about a seat," I said. "It's about a system that teaches its employees that some passengers require protocol, and others just need to be handled." Dozens of pens were scribbling now, but I wasn't finished. I've compiled a 43-page dossier of internal communication, complaints, and procedural discrepancies submitted by Atlantic Airways employees, current and former. That document is being shared with the Department of Transportation and several oversight committees this afternoon. A few reporters raised their hands, but I held up mine to continue. I've also received confirmation that the company responsible for Atlantic's private security screenings, used during off-boarding incidents like mine, is called SafeCom Response Group. I clicked again. A corporate website flashed on screen. SafeCom, Rapid Airport Intervention and Risk Management. Then I dropped the twist. The managing director of SafeCom is Matthew Parker, younger brother of Atlantic Airways CEO William Parker. The room froze. No one blinked. I let that land before delivering the next blow. In 2016, Matthew Parker and SafeCom were investigated for unlawful detainment during a case involving a Middle Eastern passenger at O'Hare International. The investigation concluded quietly. The complaint was sealed. But the Department of Justice has now reopened that case in light of new evidence. Gasps this time. I looked out over the sea of press. their heads down, typing furiously. They were never trying to de-escalate, I said. They were trying to neutralize, before the truth could travel faster than the cover-up. I closed my folder, my voice lowering as I finished. If Atlantic Airways believes this will fade with a polished apology, they are mistaken. I will not accept anything less than transparency, accountability, and structural change. And I'm not alone anymore. A single clap echoed from the side, then another. Then the room rose. A standing ovation, not because I asked for it, but because, finally, they saw it. Not a disruption, not a mistake, a pattern, a machine, and a woman who refused to oil its gears. Hours later, my name trended again. But this time, it wasn't just hashtags and opinion threads. Business Week. Olivia Carter delivers data-driven devastation to Atlantic Airways. The Atlantic. This was never about one flight. BBC, U.S. airline under fire after CEO's sister company tied to passenger detainment scandal. Even Forbes, which had profiled me months earlier under the headline, "The Woman Rewiring Brains and Boards," posted a new feature. She told them to look closer. Now everyone is. Atlantic Airways, silent. No response from their CEO. No statement from corporate. The only movement came from an internal leak. An email from William Parker himself, addressed to his senior leadership. Do not respond publicly until we've had a chance to regroup. Internal comms only. Full lockdown on PR channels. SAFECOM contracts to be reviewed pending next board session. He was retreating, not reforming. In our war room, Daniel poured coffee, not bourbon this time. They're cornered, he said. No, I corrected. They're exposed. There's a difference. Zoe pulled up a graph. Stocks dropped 11% since this morning. Press mentions are triple normal volume. Congressional committees have requested briefings. Sophia smirked. You didn't just hit their brand. You hit their bloodline. The Parker name won't recover clean. Anthony, always pragmatic, offered the last word. You've done in 7 days what most class action lawsuits can't in a year. I stared out the window, Atlanta's skyline shimmering in the twilight. They built a wall of protocol, I murmured, but forgot that silence can be just as loud when you give it a microphone. And for the first time since that flight, I let myself smile, not out of satisfaction, but because justice had entered the airspace. The elevator ride to the top floor of Atlantic Airways' corporate tower was silent. No one from the airline greeted us in the marble lobby. No assistant offered bottled water or asked about the drive. They had learned. Today, they were the ones waiting. When the double doors opened, I was met not by smiles or pleasantries, but by the tight jaws of reputational panic. 10 executives sat around a glass conference table, their postures stiff, their suits darker than usual. The view of the city behind them couldn't distract from the tension that had taken root inside these walls. I took my seat at the end of the table, flanked by Anthony and Daniel. No one spoke right away. William Parker didn't look at me. His face was pale, his eyes heavy. For the first time, I saw the cracks in his perfectly composed corporate armor. I didn't offer him a lifeline. Instead, I opened the leather portfolio in front of me, slid a stack of printed documents down the table and said, "These are the reform proposals." No one reached for them immediately. So I continued. "This isn't a negotiation," I said. "You've seen the numbers, you've read the transcripts, you've watched the footage. At this point, continued silence only increases your liability." William cleared his throat. "Dr. Carter." "No," I interrupted. "You've had plenty of time to speak. I'm here so you can listen." He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. I flipped to the first page of the proposal. Item 1. The immediate suspension of all personnel involved in the Flight 2271 incident, pending independent investigation. Silence. Item 2. Establishment of a third-party oversight board with quarterly reporting on passenger complaints, discrimination cases, and internal crew conduct. A few members of the board shifted uncomfortably. Item 3. All SAFECOM response group contracts are to be terminated and a federal compliance audit initiated. William's hand finally twitched. We've already paused the contract. That wasn't a pause, I said. It was a stalling tactic. I'm calling for permanent termination and a full disclosure of all prior detainments linked to SAFECOM, including the sealed 2016 case. This time, the silence cracked. A voice spoke from the far end of the table, measured, distinct, and calm. I support these terms. All heads turned. It was Naomi Chen, the only woman of color on the board, and, until now, one of its most silent members. I support them, she repeated, because I'm done watching this company pretend its values exist anywhere outside press statements. She stood up slowly, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of her choice. I've submitted my resignation effective immediately, she said, pulling a printed letter from her folder and placing it on the table. Gasps. Not because I'm walking away, but because my silence would be complicity, and I'd rather speak from a place where I'm not bound by your damage control playbook. She turned to me. Thank you, Dr. Carter, for forcing the conversation we all should have demanded years ago. Then, without waiting for a response, she walked out. 2 hours later, Naomi posted her resignation letter on LinkedIn. Within 30 minutes, it had over 600,000 views and was being quoted by news outlets worldwide. I refuse to sit at a table that punishes dignity and rewards silence. That single sentence became a rallying cry, and for Atlantic Airways, it was the final crack in the fuselage. The very next morning, William Parker was placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. The announcement came via a dry 2-paragraph memo sent to shareholders, but the message rang loud and clear. He was no longer untouchable. Following his suspension, the Chief Operating Officer, Gregory Shaw, was named in a separate internal review regarding his role in suppressing discrimination complaints. Several flagged emails bore his initials, approving the burying of incident reports labeled minor friction. The board convened an emergency session. Their shares were plummeting. Travel blogs were ranking Atlantic as the most controversial airline of the year. A viral TikTok trend, Fly with Respect, had travelers mocking airlines that dragged people instead of luggage. Meanwhile, Genova Biosciences investor interest spiked. One Japanese firm previously cautious about our expansion now asked to increase their equity offer by 40%. And through it all, I remained quiet, until the press requested a comment on the leadership shakeup. I issued one sentence. Consequences aren't punishment, they're accountability in motion. That evening, I stood alone on the balcony of my suite, watching planes trace white lines across the night sky. Daniel joined me, offering a glass of wine. We made it through the turbulence. I shook my head. We just hit cruising altitude. The hard part is staying up here. He smiled. Still, we're not in coach anymore. We toasted, not to victory, but to velocity. The machine that once silenced me was now coughing up pieces of itself, and I hadn't even released all the data yet. The dominoes didn't fall gently. They cracked like thunder. Within 72 hours of Atlantic Airways placing their CEO on administrative leave, the Federal Aviation Administration issued a formal notice of internal audit across 5 major U.S. carriers. The scope? Passenger complaint patterns, seating-related incidents, racial profiling cases, and crew behavior discrepancies over the last decade. The industry had pivoted from one company's PR crisis to a full-scale federal awakening. And my name, once whispered in the corner of comment threads, was now in bold, capital letters across congressional briefings. Dr. Olivia Carter, CEO, Genova Biosciences Guest Advisor, U.S. Department of Transportation. The email had arrived 3 nights earlier. Plain, no subject line fanfare, but the weight was in the content. Carter, we respectfully invite you to serve in an advisory capacity for the Department of Transportation's upcoming review on systemic inequities in commercial aviation. We believe your expertise, experience, and recent advocacy place you in a unique position to contribute meaningful insight. I didn't reply immediately, not because I wasn't honored, but because I knew what it would mean. It wasn't just a chance to fix a broken system. It was an invitation to rebuild it. When I accepted, the press went into overdrive. CNN, Dr. Carter joins federal effort to clean house in U.S. Airlines. Washington Post. From passenger to policy shaper, Olivia Carter's rapid rise. The Guardian. A black woman is reshaping how America flies, finally. But even as headlines painted me as a reformer, I was already knee-deep in data. What stunned me most wasn't what I discovered. It was what had been ignored for so long. Across 8 years, more than 3,000 formal complaints about inconsistent seating protocols had been filed by passengers of color. Less than 2% had resulted in any follow-up. Worse, over 60% of those cases had been labeled unsubstantiated, without video evidence, regardless of multiple eyewitness statements. And now, the Department of Transportation had quietly reopened a vault of complaints that had never even reached external review. 8 years of sealed internal airline memos, buried settlements, NDA-protected whistleblower attempts, anonymous passenger affidavits that had sat unread. Sophia, scanning the released documents on her tablet, looked up at me and whispered, "It's a graveyard." Yes, a graveyard of voices, and it was time to resurrect them. At the first federal roundtable, I sat opposite airline executives from Delta, United, JetBlue, and even a small private charter coalition. Most of them didn't look at me directly, but a few did. And what I saw wasn't defensiveness. It was fear, not of me, but of what came next. I laid out the structure for a 3-phase review process. Historical audit, 5 years of passenger complaints, anonymized and categorized by demographics, outcome, and response time. Training evaluation. All anti-bias programs currently in place across major carriers, compared for effectiveness, accountability, and enforcement. Policy redesign. Drafting a standardized national protocol for dispute resolution on aircraft. Prioritizing de-escalation, transparency, and equitable treatment. But what landed hardest was the data map I presented. An interactive heat map overlay of complaints by location, airline, and result. The pattern was undeniable. Disproportionate scrutiny in southern hubs, consistent misidentification in high-income premium cabins, and a phrase repeated across reports from multiple airlines. Passenger was removed due to perceived agitation, but did not raise voice or exhibit threatening behavior. Perceived agitation, I repeated to the room. We've normalized coded language so effectively that we forget it has measurable impact. No one interrupted, no one defended, because there was nothing left to defend. That afternoon, the Department of Transportation announced the launch of a joint task force, Fair Sky, Federal Aviation Integrity Reform Strategy and Knowledge Yield. I was named its interim civilian chair. I wasn't naive. Bureaucracy moved slowly. Accountability required more than public shame. It required structural muscle. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to be heard in someone else's system. I was helping to redesign the system itself. Daniel joined me later in my hotel office, tossing a folder on the desk. Investor update. Genova's valuation just jumped 17%. Japan's consortium wants to push funding to $25 million. I nodded, but didn't open it. He raised an eyebrow. Not interested? I'm interested, I said. But right now, I'm more interested in making sure the next Olivia Carter doesn't have to go through this just to sit in her seat. He sat down across from me. You ever think this is too big for one person? All the time, I said, smiling. Which is why I don't do it alone. Later that evening, I got a call from Naomi Chen. I've been contacted by 4 other board members from different airlines, she said. They want to form an interboard coalition on ethical oversight. She paused. And they want you to lead it. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing in. Then I said, tell them I'll consider it. but only if they're ready to listen to the things they've spent a decade ignoring. She laughed. You sure you weren't meant to run for something? I laughed too. No, I was meant to make sure whoever does run flies better. They say markets respond to money, but that's only half the truth. Markets respond to momentum, and we had it. After the federal task force announcement, the aviation industry didn't wait for mandates. It launched into what the media quickly dubbed the reform race. Delta Airlines released a shiny, polished campaign. We see you, we serve you. United followed with a commitment to anonymous passenger experience reviews and an annual equity audit. JetBlue introduced a live pilot program where in-flight complaint escalations would be reviewed by a third-party moderator, not just the cabin crew supervisor. But none of them moved the needle quite like Altura Air. They were smaller, regional, quietly expanding into international routes. But what they lacked in size, they made up for in timing. Within a week of the national audit rollout, Altura launched a massive campaign across social media, television, and even streaming platforms. It was called Respect Takes Off. Polished visuals, emotional testimonials, diverse staff faces, passengers describing being seen, heard, valued. And then came the final twist. Altura announced an exclusive keynote speaker for their upcoming summit on aviation ethics and innovation, Dr. Olivia Carter. Except I had never agreed to that. My phone buzzed non-stop that morning. Journalists asked for confirmation. Sophia had already prepared a firm rebuttal. I made one call to Altura's CEO, Morgan Rees. She answered on the first ring. Olivia, she said, voice clipped. I'm assuming you've seen it. I have, and I never consented to be part of your campaign. She exhaled. Our team moved faster than they should have. I was going to call today. We wanted you to headline the summit. Why? Because you're the future of this space, and because our industry needs someone like you steering the message. I didn't respond immediately. I looked out the window instead, watching a plane glide across a cloudless sky. Then I said, I'm not a message. She was silent. I'm not a face for hire. I'm not your moral camouflage, I continued. I don't do campaigns. I do frameworks. I don't amplify what's already shiny. I build what lasts. Morgan tried to recover. Of course, but we hope this could be a partnership. It's not, I said. Not now. I hung up before she could say more. The press found out about my refusal within hours, and to my surprise, they didn't twist it. Instead, the coverage leaned toward admiration. Vox. Dr. Carter turns down PR stunt, reinforces commitment to real change. Bloomberg. She doesn't endorse. She engineers. Olivia Carter holds the line. My team gathered later that day, a quiet pride humming through the room. They thought you'd be flattered, Daniel said, sipping his espresso, that you'd jump at the stage and applause. I don't need a stage, I said. I already have altitude. Meanwhile, the public reaction was reaching a boiling point. Hashtags turned into movements. Travelers began tagging airlines in tweets with phrases like #ShowMeYourPolicy and #FlyWithAccountability. A viral TikTok by a young black college student describing her years of being double-checked every time she boarded with a first-class ticket racked up 9 million views in 48 hours. I'm not looking for champagne, she said in the clip. I'm looking for equal air pressure, the kind that doesn't make me hold my breath when I board. It hit home. Comments poured in. I didn't know other people went through this. Thought it was just me. This is the first time I've seen someone with power speak for the rest of us. Dr. Carter gave me vocabulary for something I could never explain. Zoe collected the top trending videos and read aloud one viewer's comment. She made policy human. That's what struck me most. I hadn't wanted to become a symbol, but somehow I'd become a conduit, not just for justice, but for language. For the invisible stories people had carried in their heads without ever feeling like they could be said out loud. I spent the next few days reviewing case files submitted by whistleblowers now emboldened by the wave. Most weren't dramatic. They were quiet humiliations, the kind no headline would touch. A frequent flyer mother of two, constantly asked to prove her infant's ticket while her white counterparts passed without question. A paraplegic veteran escorted off a plane after asking for assistance twice because the crew deemed him agitated. A South Asian businessman forced to open his carry-on in front of the cabin after being randomly flagged post-boarding. None of them made news. All of them deserved better. So I began compiling something new, a policy blueprint, not just for one airline, not even just for America, for aviation as a global standard. At the core of the blueprint were 5 pillars: visibility, passenger complaint dashboards accessible to the public, with anonymized data updated quarterly; verification, clear, auditable logs of seating disputes and crew decisions; no more he said, she said arbitration behind locked doors; voice, a passenger advocate role created within each airline, not funded by PR, but by independent oversight boards; value, mandatory, recurring anti-bias training with real performance consequences, no more checkbox workshops; vigilance, penalties for false accusations based on appearance, and escalation protocols that reward de-escalation, not intimidation. It wasn't radical. It was what should have already existed. When I presented a draft of the blueprint to the Fair Sky Task Force, one member said, "This reads like a constitution." I smiled. It should, because freedom of movement should include freedom from fear. And that was the moment I realized something had shifted, not in them, in me. I was no longer responding to what had happened. I was designing for what shouldn't have to. The email came in at 6:07 a.m. Subject: Final confirmation. Full acceptance of terms attached was a 5-page document bearing the digital signatures of the entire Atlantic Airways Executive Board. Not one clause had been edited, not one demand negotiated. They had accepted everything. Mandatory training, transparent complaint systems, external audit boards, public reporting, termination of SAFECOM contracts, all of it. The final line of the agreement read, "We acknowledge our past failures and commit to a future of equity, dignity, and systemic accountability." It was the most powerful sentence they had ever written, because this time, I wrote it for them. By midday, the airline released a public statement. No deflection, no euphemisms, just a straight headline. Atlantic Airways commits to Dr. Olivia Carter's reform plan, apologizes without condition. The press ate it up, but this time, not with skepticism, with relief. Reuters. Finally, accountability. Airline accepts landmark terms after discrimination fallout. NBC. Olivia Carter's reforms to become industry template. The New York Times. $3 million restored, but redefined. The last headline was a reference to what I did next. Because while the world celebrated the agreement, I made a quiet decision. Instead of accepting the reinstated $3 million diversity partnership contract, I restructured it, not into sponsorships, not into branding, into a fund. The Carter Legacy Initiative, a fully independent nonprofit foundation, funded by Atlantic Airways, governed by a diverse civilian board. Its mission? To train, certify, and support anti-bias and de-escalation education for airline staff across North America. Flight attendants, pilots, gate agents, security contractors, anyone who touched the passenger experience. But more than just training, the fund would offer support. Mental health resources for whistleblowers, scholarships for aspiring aviation professionals from marginalized communities, and a confidential system for reporting systemic abuse. It would not bear my name. It would bear my parents' names, the Lillian and Ernest Carter Foundation. Because long before I was dragged off that plane, they had been dragged through far worse. My mother, Lillian, had grown up in 1960s Alabama, where colored waiting areas were not history lessons, but part of her daily life. She told me stories of sitting at the back of buses, of teachers who didn't bother learning her name, of job interviews that ended as soon as she walked through the door. My father, Ernest, had been a Vietnam veteran who, after serving 2 tours, returned home only to be denied service at a diner because he was still wearing his uniform, and he was still black. They had raised me to be excellent, not to be accepted, but to be undeniable. I called them that evening, hours after the Atlantic announcement. Mom answered on the first ring. "You're on every channel," she said. "I know," I replied, "but that's not why I'm calling." I told them about the foundation, about the training program, about their names etched into every certificate that would one day hang in break rooms across airports. Silence. Then my father cleared his throat. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I did," I said softly, "because I'm standing on your flight path." They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. I heard it in the breath my mother finally exhaled, like she had been holding it in since 1965. At the launch ceremony 2 weeks later, I stood on a stage in a packed auditorium, surrounded by airline staff, regulators, press, and passengers who had come just to say thank you. Behind me was a banner that read, "Training isn't optional when dignity is mandatory." As the first cohort of flight attendants signed their pledges, I saw Aisha Thomas among them, now promoted, smiling, clipboard in hand. She winked at me, and just behind her, a young man in uniform, freshly hired, held up his certificate and asked to take a photo with me. "I'm here because of you," he said. "No," I corrected gently. "You're here because you belong." Later that night, I stood alone in the empty training room. The chairs were still pushed in. The screen still displayed the final slide. "You are the system now. Make it better." I ran my fingers along the back of one chair, remembering the hard plastic seats in my childhood classrooms, where I was always the only black girl in the gifted program. I remembered the day in medical school when a professor called me Olivia Washington 3 times in a row because he didn't think I looked like a Carter. I remembered the first investor who said, "You're impressive for someone like you." And I remembered the silence on that plane, the kind that tells you this space is not yours. That silence had become noise now, powerful, righteous, relentless noise. And in that noise, we had found our signal. 3 months to the day. That's how long it had been since I'd last boarded a plane. Not because I was afraid, not because I held resentment. I had simply needed time. Time to build, to reform, to lead. Now, it was time to return. My team had arranged everything with discretion. No press, no fanfare, just a simple round trip from Atlanta to Chicago for a leadership summit. The same route I had flown dozens of times over the years. But this time, the air felt heavier with meaning. As I stepped into the terminal, the familiar announcements and airport buzz wrapped around me like a strange echo from a past life. The rolling wheels of my carry-on were softer this time. New luggage, gifted by a group of airline staff who had completed the first phase of the Carter Legacy Initiative training. At the gate, I scanned my boarding pass. The agent looked up, eyes wide for a moment. Recognition flickered. "Dr. Carter, welcome back," she said softly, as if the words might shatter something sacred. "We're honored." I nodded, offering a small smile. "Thank you." She didn't ask for photos. She didn't gesture for others. She just let me pass. That, in itself, felt like a revolution. On board, I expected quiet glances, maybe a few stares. What I didn't expect was respect so deeply embedded in every interaction that it felt organic, genuine. The flight attendant, a tall, middle-aged black woman named Monique, approached me as I settled into my seat. "No special treatment," I whispered. She nodded. "Of course not, ma'am. Just doing my job, thanks to you." She walked away without a word more, just a hand on her heart. I sat by the window, same spot I had been removed from months earlier. But now, no one questioned my presence. No one asked to see my ID twice. No one shifted uncomfortably in the seat next to me. It wasn't just tolerance, it was belonging. That was the shift. That was the legacy. Halfway through the flight, I pulled out my tablet to review a presentation draft. But a sealed envelope in my bag caught my eye. It had arrived at my office the day before, forwarded from the Carter Legacy Initiative's headquarters, written in careful cursive on the front, to Dr. Olivia Carter, from Kayla J., age 12. I opened it slowly, expecting a standard thank you note. Something sweet, maybe hopeful, but what I read took my breath away. Dear Dr. Carter, my name is Kayla. I'm 12 years old and I live in Memphis. My mommy works at the airport and told me all about you. I watched your speech online and made my whole class watch it too. Before I saw you, I thought first class wasn't for people like us. I thought fancy planes and big jobs were just for TV. But now I know that I can sit anywhere I work hard to be, that I don't have to shrink or smile small to make people comfortable, that someone like me can fly and lead and fix things that are broken. Thank you for making a seat for me. I want to be a pilot one day. I want to fly planes that treat people right. And when I do, I'll say, I fly with Carter wings. Love, Kayla. I didn't realize I was crying until Monique reappeared, offering a tissue with wordless grace. I've seen a lot of passengers on this route, she said gently, but I've never seen one build a runway for someone else mid-flight. I looked up, eyes blurred. This is why, I whispered. She nodded. Always was. When we landed, the passengers disembarked as usual. No applause, no announcement, just quiet movement. But as I walked toward the exit, a little girl about Kayla's age stood at the front of the cabin, holding her mother's hand. She wore a plastic pilot's badge and had her curls tied up with a rainbow headband. She looked up at me, then tugged on her mom's arm. Mommy, she said in a whisper that filled the entire space. That's the lady from the video. The one who changed everything. Her mother smiled. Yes, baby, that's her. I crouched down to the girl's level. What's your name? I asked. Jada, she said shyly. Are you going somewhere special? She nodded. To see my grandma. But one day, I want to fly the plane. I smiled. Then you better start learning early. She beamed. And in that moment, I knew something vital. The legacy wasn't mine. It was theirs now, carried forward by every child who no longer questioned their place in a seat, in a room, in the sky. Back home that night, I sat in my living room, rereading Kayla's letter by lamplight. Daniel called. They want to name the next training module after you, he said. You know, something like the Carter Standard. I laughed gently. That's flattering, but unnecessary. He paused. You really believe that? I do, because if we do this right, no one will remember my name in 20 years. They'll just assume the system always treated people with dignity. Legacy without ego, he said. You're a rare one, Olivia. I looked back at the envelope, Kayla's handwriting dancing across the paper. No, I said. I'm just finally sitting where I belong.